Okay, here's part 3. We're going to talk about some tips to prepare for media interviews, which is very important. Avoid inside speak and jargon. Pretend like you're explaining this to a 7-year-old. It's the best way to do. Keep it clear, concise, and simple that anyone can understand. Speak slowly and clearly. I'm guilty of this. A lot of people are guilty of this. When you're doing something, take your time. Pretend like you're almost like you want to sound like you're talking very slowly, because it may sound slow to you, but actually it's better to get understood. Be prepared. Talked about this earlier. You always want to be prepared. Know your messages. Know what you're trying to get across. Practice, practice, practice. If you're preparing to do an interview, have somebody in your local, or maybe your wife or your husband or a friend, ask you some of the tough questions that you think you're going to get. Practice, practice, practice is important. Emphasize 3 to 4 main points at most. Self-explanatory. Have sound bites ready. Reporters want 7 to 10 seconds max, or they're going to use, you could talk to them for 20 minutes and they'll use a short quote that you're going to use. So you have to have a sound bite ready that gets across your key, concise message. Some other tips. Be confident, relaxed, enthusiastic. Smile. You are the expert on this issue. Be confident, relaxed. Listen to the questions and take as long as you need to answer. The real exception is live TV. If somebody's doing a taped interview and you're asking, get your thoughts together. Don't answer just because you want to answer quickly. Think about what you want to say. Include question in the answer. Avoid saying it. If they ask you a question, for instance, like, I heard that there are these assaults going on across there have been 15 bus drivers that have been assaulted over the last year. You want to use that word. Say, yes, over the last 2 months, there have been 15 bus drivers who have been assaulted. And this is what ATU Local 732 is going to do about it. Don't say the word as I said or Everybody's guilty of this. I'm guilty of it. But you really want to try to avoid these things. Well, this, or as I said, It's very common to do that. Keep those to a minimum. Try to keep the ums to a minimum too. Pretty self-explanatory. A couple's going to happen, but really try to keep the ums to a minimum. And the way that you can effectively notice that is tape yourself with your iPhone, giving an answer, and you'll see that you do a lot more than you think. Just the facts. Don't fill empty space. I talked about this before. One of the most interesting things that a reporter will do is to basically ask you a question, let you answer, and then they will not say anything. And it's very uncomfortable for people to sit in silence until you automatically start talking. Don't do that. Don't fill that empty space. It's especially important for TV interviews as well. Some more tips. Interviews are like business transactions. Treat them as business transactions. Anything you say and will be eventually used. I think that we all know that Donald Trump learned this when he thought the cameras were off. Happened years ago, but anytime you're even talking to them off the record, there really is no off the record. Stop talking when your point is made. Very important. Talked about this earlier. If you don't know an answer, it's okay to say, hey, I'll find out for you. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't want to give you a false answer, so I'll have to get back to you on it. Smile. Don't be afraid to appear friendly. It makes you real smile. When you're on camera, smiling makes you look much better. Remember, you are the expert. You know everything about this strike. You know everything about these contract negotiations. You know about members being assaulted. You know about these heroes. You are the expert on these issues. Be friendly and honest. Never lie. That's important. If you don't know the answer, get back to them. Never respond with no comment. It sounds like you have something to hide. Not a good thing to do. Instead, explain why you can't answer and go back to your main points. Go back to your main messages. Don't lose your cool. Very important. We've seen this time and time again. We actually saw it in that video you watched in the beginning of Bob Newhart. Some reporters like debate interviews or play devil's advocate. Don't give angry or defensive responses. Simply redirect everything to your main points. Don't over-prepare. If it sounds like you memorized a speech or your mannerisms look rehearsed, your message loses much of its effectiveness. Just relax. You're the expert. Be yourself. You'd be shocked. You're actually a pretty good person, a pretty good spokesperson. Interview pitfalls. Take control of the interview. Don't let reporters take control of that interview. Anticipate the tough questions. This goes with practice. Think, what is the hardest thing that somebody could ask me? Do not repeat a negative. If they say something negative about your union or about your members, do not repeat that. It just, by saying it, you're almost saying it's true. Stay calm. Always stay calm. If you don't want a statement quoted, don't say it. Even if it's off the record, just don't say it. Some more interview pitfalls. You don't have to answer a question even if the reporter asks you numerous times. They will try and do this. Reporters will try and do this. They'll ask you a question one way, then they'll ask you another way. Just stick to your main points and say, well, that's an interesting question, but did you ever think about this? Now I'm going to go over some ways to do that in other ways. Silence does not mean you have to talk. I've talked about this, but I can't emphasize it more. Remember, when you are always on the record, be careful and mindful of what you say. Tricks of the trade. There's flagging, emphasizing something, bridging, transition, hooking, and leading. Here's some examples that I can give you. Hooking. But that's not the most important issue out here. The most important issue is this. Flagging. Listen, the bottom line is this, and you go back to your main message. The key to remember here is this. So these are simple ways that you can do it. Bridging. I can't speculate on, why they're cutting funding, but what I can tell you is that riders need funding, and this is why we need more transit funding. Or you can use on the contrary. On the contrary, here's what we can do. These are all effective ways to turn the point and go back to your key messages. Tips for TV interviews. Know the technology. If you're doing TV, know it. If you're doing radio, know it. Format. Is it live? Is it taped? Is it a weekly show? Is it a daily show? Is it a print publication? You have to know that. Live or taped. You can retape answers. If it is a taped interview and you don't like what you say, listen, I didn't really like what I say. Could I retape that answer? Most times they will let you do that. Sound bites. Remember, I talked about this earlier. You want to have sound bites, and you'll see this a little later down when I talk about the anatomy of a typical news story. They're only looking for 7 to 10 seconds of what you want, what you're going to say, which you could be interviewed for 20 minutes. Camera angles. Look at the reporter, not the camera. Do not want to look directly into the camera. Look at the reporter who's interviewing you. Gestures. Don't want to make many gestures because they're going to shoot basically from the top, mostly just your head, and your butt and the top from your shoulders up. So any gestures you make will mean your hands will come flying in and out of the camera angle. You don't want that. Common interview mistakes. Assuming a reporter is familiar with the topic. Do not assume that. Failing to return reporter calls in a timely manner. Call them back when they call you. Lack of preparation, not being prepared, not knowing your concise messages, not being prepared for tough questions. Asking to see a story before it runs. They're never going to let you do that. Calling to complain after the story runs. Don't call. You can call and say, listen, I saw your story, it was good, but I want to make sure I get my point across. For broadcasts, using the word repeatedly. This is the ums and the You really have to keep it down to a minimum. The way you do that is by practicing. Some other common TV interview mistakes. Like I said, do not look directly into the camera. Look at the interviewer. Distracting gestures are terrible. Speaking in a muffled voice. Coughing, sneezing, blowing your nose. Holding up props to the camera. Wearing some crazy distracting clothing. Be prepared. It helps if you have a folder with you with the following: your core messages, your main data findings, news clippings on the topic, fact sheets, background information that you can be prepared for. Give this reporter. Anatomy of a news story. This is what's very interesting. This is what a typical TV, local TV, even national news story looks for. 7 to 10 seconds of the anchor, 7 to 10 seconds of the reporter on the scene, 7 to 10 seconds background, 7 to 10 seconds of you, the expert, the reporter back to the reporter again, 7 to 10 seconds in the anchor, total 50 to 70 seconds. Sorry. Here's some TV dress guidelines. Anatomy of a news story. This is what's very interesting. This is what a typical TV, local TV, even national news story looks for. 7 to 10 seconds of the anchor, 7 to 10 seconds of the reporter on the scene, 7 to 10 seconds background, 7 to 10 seconds of you, the expert, the reporter back to the reporter again, 7 to 10 seconds in the anchor, total 50 to 70 seconds. Here's some TV dress guidelines. Wear your ATU shirt, ATU union pin or uniform. Wear solid colors, neutral or dark blue. Avoid stripes and complex patterns. They look terrible on TV. Avoid flashy jewelry, earrings, necklace, bracelets. You do not want to wear jewelry. Here's some tips for radio interviews. Know if it's live or taped, same thing. Debate or call-in shows, they can have call-ins. Is it debate? Someone else going to be there? You need to be prepared. Ask them these questions. Repeat your major points. Vary the speed and pitch of your voice when you're talking, because it's just audio. When you're talking about something, maybe talk a little louder or emphasize it with your voice, because you can't, or they can't see your gestures or your facial expressions when you're on the radio. Tips for print interviews. If you're unsure of an exact answer, it's okay to get back to the reporter. Offer charts, tables, photos if you have them. Always good. Offer background when possible. Sound bites. Your quote will be very short. Just as these TV things, you'll talk with this reporter for 15 to 20 minutes, and they're only going to use a quick quote from you. That's it.